news. A jury in the US state of Wisconsin has been sent out to deliberate in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse. He was the teenager who fatally shot two men and injured a third with an assault rifle during protests in the city of Kenosha last year. You might remember some of these images from then. Kyle Rittenhouse said he had travelled to the area to protect people's property during riots, which had erupted after police shot a black man, Jacob Blake. Well, here is the prosecution laying out the closing arguments. You'll hear a mention of Joseph Rosenbaum, the first person that Mr. Rittenhouse shot and killed.
They have to convince you that Joseph Rosenbaum was going to take that gun and use it on the defendant, because they know you can't claim self-defense against an unarmed man like this. You lose the right to self-defense when you're the one who brought the gun, when you're the one creating the danger, when you're the one provoking other people.
Well, let's go to Kenosha now. We can speak to the BBC's Nomia Iqbal, who is outside the courthouse. Prosecution said he was acting like a hero in a Western film. What was the defence argument?
Well, for the defence, this is a clear case of self-defence. They say that Kyle Rittenhouse used his gun because he was being ambushed by, and I quote what the defence said, a crazy person. Now, just to let you know, the jury has now retired to consider its verdict. There are 18 jurors, but they will whittle down to 12. So there are 6 alternate jurors who will be on standby if they need to be, but it's 12 jurors that will deliver Kyle Rittenhouse's fate. And as we heard there from the prosecution, they presented a strong argument, as did the defence. For the prosecution, Kyle Rittenhouse was an armed vigilante who inserted himself into a very volatile situation in Kenosha, a town that he's not from, and was instigated the only killings that happened, whereas the defence say that he was ambushed. As I mentioned, it's ultimately it's the 12 jurors that will decide what the verdict is. If he is convicted of the most serious charge, he could face life behind jail. As you can imagine, the case has been so politically divisive. There are already protesters outside on the court steps, and the governor here has ordered the National Guard to be on standby in case any protests turn violent.
Just talk us through the events of that evening last October, because Rittenhouse had actually travelled to the area from elsewhere.
That's right. He is from a town in the neighbouring state of Illinois, and Kenosha was undergoing its 3rd night of unrest, and that unrest had been sparked by the shooting of a local black man here named Jacob Blake. He was shot 7 times in the back by a white police officer. Kyle Rittenhouse's defence is that he came over to help, that he was asked to be here to provide security. There was a series of confrontations and it led to the shooting of 3 men. 2 of them were killed and 1 was seriously injured. And he came over with a military-style rifle, and there was a controversial moment yesterday when the judge dismissed that charge against him. Under Wisconsin law, it is illegal for under 18-year-olds to carry that sort of rifle, but there are some exceptions, and that exception was applied to Rittenhouse. So there's 5 charges now that the jury has to consider against him.
And also, Rittenhouse had said he'd appeared or had been at other protests and acted as a first aider, which was presumably part of the defence of his self-defence.
That's right. He said that he came with a medic kit. That was challenged by the prosecution during the trial as well. But as I mentioned, this is a politically divisive case, and you hear that phrase a lot. So much in America does sort of fall along party lines, but there's so many groups are invested in what the verdict could mean. So for conservative groups who have largely embraced Kyle Rittenhouse, he is this patriot who took a stand against lawlessness, and they worry that if he is convicted, what that might mean for the right to defend yourself, the right to own guns. Whereas for the more liberal groups, they look at Kyle Rittenhouse as the face of a gun culture that's out of control in this country, and they are worried that if he is cleared and he can't be retried for this crime again, they worry that that could potentially give a green light to people in the future, people to pick up a gun and come to a volatile protest and not face any consequences. And also, the judge in this case has even talked about the political division. He, in his summing up yesterday, said to the jurors, don't pay any attention to what the current president all the former president has to say about this trial. The then President Donald Trump backed Kyle Rittenhouse, whereas Joe Biden, when he was the presidential candidate, condemned him.